So, I have pumpkin cookies, I have pumpkin pancakes, I have pumpkin blondies, but I don't have a traditional pumpkin pie video. I think it's time to change that. The first thing we're going to do is make the crust, and it's an easy crust. I've made this before on the channel. I've got some all-purpose flour and some salt. I'm now adding some cold unsalted butter that I cubed up. I'm just going to be tossing it in the flour here and the salt, and I'm just going to make sure everything is coated because it's going to be easier to cut this up with a fork. And if you have a pastry cutter, that's great. It'll work better for you, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to use a fork, and I'm just going to press it all down and make sure that I'm breaking up the butter into the flour, and I'm going to get a kind of sandy consistency, and that's what you want. After that, I'm going to add some ice cold water, just a little bit. You don't want to use a lot. And I'm going to start tossing this around with my fork. And at first, this is going to seem very dry and very unworkable. But once you get your hands in there, that heat from your hands are going to actually make this a lot easier to work with. And you're just going to be able to knead it up, collect all that butter and all that flour. And as you can see here, we have ourselves a beautiful dough. And I'm just going to take this and put it in some plastic wrap. And this is going to go in the fridge for about half an hour until we're ready to use it. After half an hour, I'm just going to flour my work surface. And I'm just going to take my dough out, flip it in the flour, and I'm just going to roll it out with my rolling pin. Now, if you're rolling this and the sides start to crack a little bit, just go ahead and shape it with your fingers, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And I've got a greased pie dish here, and I'm just going to take my dough and fold it up. I've shown you guys how to do this before, and that's an easier way to get this into the dish. And once you unfold it, we can actually start making this look like a pie crust. And I'm just going to press it in there, make sure there's no air pockets, and I'm just going to take a knife and cut off the excess dough. And the reason why I want to do this is so that I can press up the sides of the dough, because you want this to be a little bit higher than the actual dish itself, because when this is in the oven, it's actually going to shrink. And since we have all this extra dough, we can shape this into the shape that we want. And what we want is a crimped edge. I mean, this is optional. You don't actually have to do this. You can just keep it plain round, but why do that when you can make it look more decorative? So I can't really say I'm the best crimper in the world. This is going to have more of a rustic look, especially when it bakes into the oven. But hey, that's how people will know it's homemade. Anyway, I'm taking a fork and I'm poking holes at the bottom of the crust just to make sure this doesn't rise. And I'm going to take some parchment paper that I crinkled up with my bare hands. I'm going to press this onto my dough, and then I'm going to take some baking beans. These are garbanzo beans, and I'm going to blind bake this into my oven. Now, my oven is at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is going to bake for 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, take it out of the oven, and we're going to take out the parchment and the garbanzo beans, put that to the side to let them cool, and this is going to go back into the oven for another 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, it's going to be done. It's going to be browned a little bit, and we're going to let that cool while we make our filling. But first things first, we got to preheat our oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. You do not want to bake this at 375. That's way too high a temperature. And I'm going to take some pumpkin puree in my bowl, and I'm also going to take 2 whole eggs and some egg yolks. And I know they're a little broken, but it's okay. It's still going to work. And I'm just going to pour that into my bowl with my puree. And I'm going to add some light brown sugar, some granulated sugar, some cinnamon, some nutmeg, a little bit of ground ginger, and some salt. And I'm also adding cornstarch. Now, the egg yolks and the cornstarch are going to be a binder for this. It's going to make it richer and a greater texture. I also added some vanilla extract and some heavy cream. And I'm just going to mix that up with a large whisk until I get a nice smooth batter. It's going to be kind of on the liquidy side, but it's okay. This is a custard pie, and this is the texture that we want. And once this is all looking good, we're going to take our custard, and we're just going to pour that into our cooled pie crust. And once that's all done, make sure you get all of that out of there. And be very careful when carrying this into the oven. This is going to go in a 325 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 70 to 75 minutes. It's going to take a little while, but keep an eye on it. You don't want it to be completely firm in the middle. You want it to have a little bit of a jiggle, because this is going to continue baking even out of the oven. It's going to be very hot, and you're going to have to let this cool for about 4 hours. I'm not joking, because you want this to be cool. I know it's tempting, but you don't want to serve a hot pumpkin pie. Anyway, while that's cooling, I'm going to take some heavy cream, and I'm going to make a whipped cream out of this. Now, once you see it to start foaming at the top, I'm going to turn off my stand mixer. You can use an electric mixer for this. I'm going to add my powdered sugar, some cinnamon, and some vanilla extract. And I'm just going to keep mixing this until I get soft peaks, not stiff peaks. I want this to kind of be on the runny side, because when I put it on top of my pie, I kind of want it to drape down the sides. And I'm just going to make sure that everything is incorporated, and make sure you taste it too. You want there to be enough sweetness and enough cinnamon. But this is perfect, and after letting this rest in the fridge overnight, it's time to finally dig into this pie, and it is looking good and it smells great. I can see that the egg yolks and the cornstarch did their job because there are no cracks in sight. And letting it cool completely and then letting it chill overnight, which will result in a pretty darn good looking pie if I do say so myself. And the last thing to do is place a dollop of whipped cream on top of my slice. And now it's finally time to take a bite. And first of all, this texture is absolutely perfect. So I already knew that this was going to be absolutely wonderful, but how does it taste? And the verdict is wonderful as well, because that cinnamon and nutmeg is bursting out with flavor. You get a small hint of the ginger, and that whipped cream on top really makes this. But to be honest with you, I think it's good either with or without the cream, but I say make it. It really does make this feel more complete. And the crust is great too. This is my go-to crust recipe. It's super simple and it doesn't need any added sweetness to it. I think it's perfect the way it is. You don't need to add any sugar because all the sweetness is in the filling. And what you get is a delicious dessert that you'll not just want during the fall, but during any time of the year. Now the thing is, every year for Thanksgiving, my mom will actually make her own pumpkin pie. Now the question is, whose pie is better, hers or mine? Well, I'll tell you.